Maxim closed the flat door behind him as he set off for work, just like every other weekday. The morning was cool, but it promised to be warm and sunny. He didn't even have time to say goodbye to Anya, his wife, as she was still asleep. Their little son Igor was quietly sniffling in his cot. Maxim looked at them before he left and, as usual, felt a warm sense of gratitude for his family. He loved them more than anything else in the world, and the thought that their happiness was unshakable always warmed his soul. Maxim's work was difficult and demanded a lot of time and attention. He worked as an engineer in a construction company and was engaged in project management. His days were scheduled by minutes, starting with morning meetings and finishing with checking construction sites. But despite all the business, he was always fueled by the thought that his family was waiting for him at home. That day didn't bode well for anything special. Meetings went on as usual, colleagues discussed project details, and Maxim's phone occasionally vibrated with messages or calls. He was immersed in his work and didn't notice that it was getting close to lunchtime. Getting ready for lunch, Maxim checked his phone. There were a few unread messages from friends, a couple of work notifications, and nothing from Anya. Usually she sent him at least a short message during the day, something like "How are you?" or "I love you." But this time, her silence made him feel slightly uneasy. Maybe she was busy with Jaeger, or had she just decided not to bother him at work? He quickly dismissed these thoughts, deciding that everything was fine, and went to lunch. The day was nearing its end when his anxiety began to rise. Anya hadn't written, and when Maxim tried to call her, her phone was switched off. He tried several times, but without success. A strange sense of unease squeezed his chest. Something was wrong. When the working day was over, Maxim headed home faster than usual, skipping all the scheduled evening delays. The road, which usually seemed familiar and measured to him, seemed endless today. He tried not to think the worst, convincing himself that perhaps Anya's phone was just dead or she had gone to visit a neighbor with Igor. When Maxim drove up to the house, the sun was already beginning to set over the horizon. He quickly climbed the stairs to their floor and opened the door with the key, as he always did. But something in the air seemed different to him. An unusual silence enveloped the flat. Maxim made his way into the living room and froze in place. Anya was sitting on the sofa with her phone in her hands. Her face was as if she had been waiting for this moment. She raised her eyes to Maxim, and there was something in her gaze that he couldn't immediately recognize. It was neither fright nor relief, but rather something between guilt and weariness. "Where is Jaeger?" Maxim asked quickly, looking round. "He is at my mom's," Anya answered quietly. "I took him to her for the day." Maxim felt a wave of relief course through his body. Igor was safe, and that was the most important thing. But then his attention returned to Anna. "Why was your phone off? I called you several times." Anya was silent. She stared at the phone in her hands as if she didn't know what to say. "Anya, what's wrong?" There was alarm in his voice. "Why are you acting like this?" She looked up at him and said the words Maxim had never expected to hear, "We need to talk." Maxim froze. Those were the worst words one could hear from a loved one. He sat down across from her, feeling his heart start to pound harder and harder. He didn't want to believe that something had gone wrong in their relationship. He thought they had everything perfect. But her voice and her look told him that something serious was going on. "Yeah," Anya paused, swallowed, and finally said, "I cheated on you." These words echoed in Maxim's head. He couldn't believe it. It was as if the world around him had collapsed in an instant. He tried to make sense of what he had heard, but he couldn't find the words. "What?" he said with difficulty, unable to believe his ears. "It only happened once," Anya continued, avoiding his gaze. "It was just a moment of weakness. I don't know how it happened. It was a colleague from work. It didn't mean anything. It didn't mean anything." Maxim interrupted her, feeling his voice becoming harsh. "Did you think about what does this mean for me? For our family? For Jaeger?" She hung her head, her eyes filling with tears. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "I really didn't mean for this to happen. I am confused." Maxim got up from the couch and walked over to the window, trying to collect his thoughts. He felt like he had lost his footing. Everything they had built together, their marriage, their family, their future, now seemed destroyed. He didn't know what to do. Leave her, forgive her. How could you forgive something like that? Several minutes passed before Maxim could collect his thoughts. Anya was still sitting on the couch, silently looking at her hands. There was a heavy, oppressive silence in the room. Maxim finally turned to her. "Why did you do this?" he asked quietly. There was no longer any harshness in his voice, only deep pain. "I can't explain it," she began to say, brushing the tears from her face. "I was lonely, you were always at work, and I felt like we had become strangers to each other. I am not making excuses, I was confused. I felt bad, and I made a mistake." Maxim was silent, his thoughts full of anger and sadness. He always thought that their relationship would withstand everything. They had survived so many difficulties and always stayed together. But now this confidence seemed empty. He understood that he had to make a decision that would change everything. Forgive or leave. Stay for their son or break off the relationship. The answers did not come easy. The next few days passed in a fog. Maxim tried to avoid Anya, immersing himself in work and caring for Jaeger. He could not look at her without feeling pain and disappointment. He did not know how to live with this knowledge, but he could not leave either. Jaeger meant too much to him to simply break up their family. Anya, in turn, tried her best to fix the situation. She apologized, tried to talk to him, but every step she took seemed futile. Maxim withdrew into himself, and she could not reach his heart. One evening, when Jaeger was already asleep, Anya came up to Maxim and sat next to him in the kitchen. She was silent for a long time before speaking. "I know that you are in great pain," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "And I understand if you can never forgive me, but I ask you for one thing: think about our son. He needs a family, and I am ready to do everything to regain your trust." Maxim looked at her. Her eyes were full of tears, but they showed a desire to correct the mistake. He himself did not know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for sure: he did not want to lose his son. Perhaps he would have to sacrifice his feelings for Jaeger. "I don't know if I can forgive you," he said quietly, "but for the sake of our son, I am ready to try." These words sounded like a step towards reconciliation, although Maxim understood that they had a long way to go to restore their relationship. The pain would not go away immediately, and their marriage would never be the same. But for the sake of his family, he was ready to take this first step.